How's it going, everyone? Mitchen here. Today I'm going to be showing you my Lugia V-Star deck for the new Temporal Forces format. Lugia is back as a probably tier 1 archetype, as it got a really new powerful attacker in Cinccino from Temporal Forces. So I'm going to be going through the exact 60 cards that I'm currently playing and talk to you about why I play these cards, specifically the certain counts of them even, and justify why I think this 60 is pretty good and why you should probably be playing it yourself. So with that said, let's get into it. We're starting off the deck with our main Pokemon here, Lugia V-Star and Lugia V. We're playing a 3-3 line of these guys. They're not actually the best attacker. Lugia is not a deck that you actually get out more than one Lugia. You tend to just play thick counts for consistency, but it's really in here for Summoning Star, its V-Star ability, which lets us put 2 Archeops in this case. That's all it really needs to say, but it lets you put 2 colorless Pokemon that don't have a rule box from your discard pile onto your bench. We're just always using that to try and get 2 Archeops on the board as early as turn 2, and maybe use Tempest Dive once or twice on the one we set up, but that's about it for Lugia. Then we're going on to Archeops, the kind of star of the show that runs this deck. Primal Turbo is just one of the best abilities ever. It lets you put 2 special energy from your deck to one of your Pokemon, and you can use 2 of those abilities every turn, since Summoning Star lets us put 2 onto the board. Now, even though we can only use 2 of them at most, we play 4 because, once again, consistency is a big thing with this deck. We really want to make sure we're getting out Lugia V turn 1, then turn 2 Lugia V-Star, Summoning Star, 2 Archeops in play, and then go from there. Now we're moving on to the new attacker we've gotten, and this is kind of the main Pokemon we're actually going to be attacking with in this deck. We've got Minccino and Cinccino. So starting off with the Minccino, I'm playing 4 of them, full play set, maximum you can play. Minccino actually feels like probably the best starter in this deck, and therefore it makes sense to play 4 Minccino and only 3 Lugia, being the highest odds Pokemon to have in your starting hand. It's a 1-prizer, so it's better to have in the active for things that can knock us out before we really get going. And it's also really got a good attack that we can use. Call for Family lets us search for 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto our bench. So if we go second and happen to whiff a Lugia V, as long as we have an Energy and a Minccino inactive, we actually still can get a Lugia V down turn 1 through Call for Family. Or if we went first but kind of stumbled on our turn 2, we can Call for Family just to set ourselves up a bit better, get another Minccino down as a backup attacker since this one's probably going to go down, get a Lugia V down. It's actually a really nice utility attack on the unevolved Pokemon. But the main attacker is the Cinccino. We're playing 3 of these guys. They have the attack special roll for 2 colorless energy. It does 70 times the amount of special energy cards attached to this Pokemon. So cards is an important indication. It means double turbo does not count as 2 on this Pokemon. But we can still get as many as 5 on this in a single turn using Primal Turbo to 2, then another 2, and then attach for turn. That's 5 special energy, meaning that we can do 350 damage. Assuming this Cinccino is already established, we can do that in just a single turn's worth of energy attachment. And that is really powerful on a 1-prize Pokemon. It lets us build OHKO numbers to pretty much anything in the game, including Charizard EX with 5 energy. And then we can do even less and commit other energy to building up backup attackers in the meantime for lower HP Pokemon, such as most of the V-Stars and lower HP EXs in the format. Cinccino is just super strong for prize trading. Then I've got 1 Snorlax. This is a familiar face in the colorless Lugia lists in recent times. Only playing 1 of these guys now because Snorlax isn't really as useful as it used to be. Cinccino is kind of the star of the show now as the 1-prize attacker, but Snorlax still feels like a really good niche card. Lugia can kind of get in with 200 damage. It's bulky. Cinccino, meanwhile, can do an absolute ton of damage, but it's low HP, takes a lot of energy commitment as well. Snorlax kind of finds a middle ground in between those that'll come up once in a while, where it doesn't need to be committed too many energy. Even though it's triple colorless, DTE does work well on this, where we can just put a DTE and 1 other energy to do 160 on 150 HP 1-prize basic Pokemon. It's also really good against the Lost Zone matchups in particular because of Unfazed Fat. There's no really good Lost Zone attacker that's worth 1 prize that can answer Snorlax in 1 turn. So they have to do something like Spit plus Spit again to knock this out. And it even makes it awkward for those 2-shot numbers because they can't do something like Spit or Ninja and then Sableye because of Unfazed Fat, preventing effects of attack from your opponent's Pokemon. So they have to overcommit and kind of waste turns and suboptimally trade with Snorlax using 1-prizers, or they have to use a 2-prizer to one-shot it, which means they've used a 2-prizer to one-shot our 1-prize Pokemon, and then it's probably just going to get responded on and OHKO'd by another 1-prize Pokemon in Cinccino. So Snorlax still finds some pretty good use in the deck. It's just we usually need more than 1. Then I've got a Lumineon, another 1 of. This is a good Pokemon to help find our supporters and help us set up. We're not really playing 2 because I find bench space is actually a little bit more of a problem in this deck, and you can almost never realistically get away with using 2 of them. Like if you're playing 2, your bench is just so bad. Because Minchinos have to actually be there and evolve, I feel like you need obviously 2 chops, and then you need a couple spots for multiple Minchinos to evolve up, since you can't just slam them in one turn. So I think just the 1 fish is pretty good. It's usually fine as long as you don't prize it. We're never really going to use 2 in a game. So as long as you don't prize it, it's fine. And even if you do, the deck can still set up with a lot of ball search without using the Lumineon in the early game. Then finally, I've got a card that I actually don't see a lot of Lugia lists playing, and that is Mew EX. It's been really good in colorless Lugia lists in the past, and I think it's still pretty good and kind of underrated right now. Restart's a decent ability, but we're not really too focused on the deck with gift energy that lets us draw cards and usually have a hand bigger than 3. But genome hacking is a really great attack that we can power up very easily with Archeops because it's all colorless energy. We choose one of our opponent's active attacks and use it as this attack. It gives us options to spread, copying an opponent's Radiant Greninja, allowing us to kill like multiple 1-prize Pokemon in a turn. It's also really good against the Charizard matchup if you don't have a Cinccino ready to go. Maybe we've used our Cinccino and attacked with the Charizard. They've return killed it. We didn't have a backup one left, but we've been keeping a 1-prize board. You can force Charizard down to 1 prize, and then because Mew is a basic, just kind of slam that, charge it up, and genome hacking copy Burning Darkness when they're at 1 prize left, and do 330 damage to Oko a Charizard EX for less energy as well, which can also matter in the late game if we've started to run out of energy. It's also a free retreater. There's a lot of decent reasons to play Mew EX, and I think it's a good card in Lugia. So I would give it a try. Next up, we've got supporters. They're pretty self-explanatory. We've got 2 Professor's Research. Gives us a lot of discard draw. We want discard options to get Archeops in the bin, and draw power is obviously pretty good. 7 cards is a lot of cards. Then we've got a couple Iono as well. These are good to shuffle our hand to the bottom if we don't want to dump it. Sometimes our hand, given we are playing a lot of energy in this deck, can be filled with too many energy and kind of bad to discard away. So this just sort of lets us reset our hand, find some new cards. It also lets us disrupt our opponent in the later game, put them to low card count so they can't just boss for game. If that's a potential condition, we can try and avoid that. Then I've got Serena. It's a supporter making kind of a debut in this recent meta. It hasn't really been played, even though it came out back in Silver Tempest alongside Lugia. It hasn't really been seeing play till now. But because we've kind of lost options of Professor Burnett, making it a little harder to get Archeops into the discard, we've had to find some other sort of supporters to use. So Serena's good because it gives us sort of an in-between of Iono and Research where I have a lot of energy in hand. I don't really want to discard all my cards, but I want to discard some cards and draw a little bit. So Serena gives us that middle ground of I can discard this Archeops in hand without having to discard the other 2-3 energy in my hand that I don't really want to get rid of. And it also acts as a V-Gust. So we have, against V Pokemon in particular, an effective 5 Gusts, which makes it really easy to just boss kill whatever we want in any given turn. And speaking of boss, like you might have caught on to Serena, the other 3 Gusts are coming from the actual boss's orders. These just let us gust down anything. Obviously a really good card in most aggro decks. Cinccino takes a lot of energy commitment when we're trying to hit big numbers, so we don't really want to be setting them up just with 2 energy and punching something like a 1-prizer. We want to be gusting down big Pokemon, loading it with a ton of energy and blowing them up. Then finally, we've got 1 Jacques. This is taking the spot of Professor Burnett that used to be played in the deck since it has rotated. It lets us search for up to 2 evolution Pokemon and put them into our hand. It doesn't discard them, so it's not as easy to just play this and get 2 Archeops in the discard immediately. But it lets us get them into our hand, which we can then Ultra Ball away. It can also find some niche use where it's actually better than Burnett, where maybe we have 1 Archeops in discard already, and we want a Jacques for our second Archeops and a Lugia V-Star, and now we've gained Lugia V-Star, as well as the other Archeops going in the discard. We didn't need 2 more, we just needed 1 more. So Jacques can occasionally find to actually be better than Burnett, but realistically it's just kind of a Burnett substitute since that card actually rotated. Next up, we've got Item Search, and literally every item we play in this deck is just Pokemon Search. The deck is pretty self-sufficient if it just sets up double Archeops turn 2. So we really just want to play an absolute ton of Pokemon Search to ensure that that's really easy. So first off, for Ultra Ball, pretty self-explanatory. It's a Pokemon Search that lets us get any Pokemon, and it also lets us discard cards from our hand. So it'll let us discard Archeops and search out new Pokemon that we want to put in play. Then we've got Capturing Aroma. This is kind of a card that we see mainly just in Lugia, just because we need so much search, evolution search in particular. Capturing Aroma is not really the most consistent card, but it kind of tends to be number 2 in searching out evolution Pokemon. And since it at least is guaranteed to get a Pokemon, whether it's an evolution or a basic, depending on the coin flip, it's pretty good in this deck. Then we've got Great Ball. This is a card that's not as guaranteed to get a Pokemon. It just looks at our top 7. So if there doesn't happen to be a Pokemon in our top 7, we don't end up getting a Pokemon. But I like it better than Nest Ball in this format because of the previously mentioned Burnett rotating. You need even more search to get evolutions in particular out. So Great Balls, although not guaranteed, can help us find Archeops a bit better that Nest Balls can never do. So that's why I like the 2 Great Ball. And then finally, with the addition of A-Specs, we've got, of course, the Pokemon Search A-Spec in Master Ball. It's just play it, any Pokemon we want, no conditions attached. Pretty good to easily search out Pokemon. Sometimes we don't have the cards in hand to just discard multiple times. Like maybe we've already got to play an Ultra Ball. So if this was another Ultra Ball, it's kind of awkward. We're discarding too many cards. This just lets us guess whatever Pokemon we want. Then no tools, skipping straight to stadiums. This deck doesn't really care for any tools. I've got 1 Mesagoza and 1 Collapse Stadium. I think I've most commonly seen actually just a singular Collapse Stadium as the stadiums in Lugia, and I kind of like the heavier stadium count. Mesagoza, although kind of like Capturing Aroma in not being the most consistent card on a coin flip, is nice to actually help us set up more consistently. Once again, lost Burnett. It's even harder to get double Archeops and Lugia V-Star set up turn 2, so any extra search is pretty nice, but I also like it as a Collapse Stadium bump. Obviously, Tempest Dive can discard Collapse on the attack, but sometimes our opponent has collapsed us, and we want to get out Collapse Stadium because we don't have bench space. Maybe we have 3 Pokemon on our bench. We figured that'd be fine because we have 2 spots for Archeops. Then they dropped Collapsed on us, didn't knock out a Pokemon. We've got only 1 Pokemon spot on our bench, and if we use Summoning Star, that means we can't get double chops, or we have to waste a turn trying to like set up Tempest Dive manually to get rid of that stadium before we can Summoning Star, or let them take a knockout to open up a spot. So Mesagoza gives us a non-collapse stadium option to bump other collapse stadiums in the early game, and I also like it for Pokemon Search. And then Collapse Stadium ourselves, it's really good for getting rid of liabilities, which is really nice. Something like the Luminion, even the Lugia V-Star, we've set up our 1 Lugia V-Star. Maybe we Tempest Dive, maybe we don't even bother, and it takes a hit. Collapse Stadium away, get rid of the liabilities. Now we're playing with a 1 prize board of really strong Pokemon, which is nice. And one more thing to mention with multiple stadiums is the control matchup. That matchup seemingly is Lugia favored, but they play Temple of Sinnoh, so we really need our Jet Energies. That's kind of the main card that lets this matchup be really favored. But if they're turned off by Temple of Sinnoh, then they don't really do anything. So multiple stadium outs is really good against that matchup as well. I would even consider finding a card to cut in this list and adding a 2nd Collapse Stadium because I really like the stadiums in this list. And that's it except for non-energy. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot of cards, but this deck plays a ton of energy, so we're getting to those next. First off, they're all special energy, obviously, because of Archeops. We're playing 4 gift energy. I would say this is probably the best special energy in this deck and probably in the format right now. Gift energy is just so good. It provides a single colorless energy, but when it's attached to a Pokemon that is knocked out by damage from our opponent's Pokemon, we then draw until we have 7 cards in hand. This actually kind of acts as Lugia's engine because every time we put up an attacker, we just have 1 gift energy, and we're just constantly drawing off our opponent's turn to 7 cards in hand. It makes us really hard to Iono as well, because if we Iono to 1-2 cards in hand, and then they knock out our Cinccino that we've established, well, we're just drawing back to 7 cards. It's a really strong energy card. Then another really good energy in the deck is Jet Energy. I'm playing 4 of these as well. This lets us pivot our Pokemon around without having to actually discard energy to pay retreat cost. Sometimes maybe we've set up a Lugia. We don't really want to get rid of it yet because we've committed energies on it, but we want to get it out of the way to just attack with Cinccino. We can attach a Jet Energy to Cinccino and move it in the active while keeping all the energy we set up on Lugia to potentially use later on. And like I mentioned, it's really strong against Block Lax control. We can use it to constantly push a Pokemon into play without actually retreating, and put an attacking Pokemon back in play to knock out a Snorlax so we don't get stuck with like Luminion in the active. Next energies we've got is Double Turbo Energy. We're moving off of the 4 ofs. I am actually only playing 3 Double Turbo in this deck. It doesn't feel as strong as it used to be in Lugia lists. I find you tend to only use 1, maybe 2 Double Turbo as actual double colorless energies, usually on Lugia's Tempest Dive and then occasionally on a Snorlax. Other than that, they tend to actually be a bit of a hindrance in terms of their lowering the damage output of your Pokemon. when we load it onto Cinccino, since it counts special energy cards, not special energies, this still only counts as 70 damage. And then because of the reduction that double turbo adds, it actually only counts as 50. So we can do 1 double turbo energy on a Cinccino, a 5 energy Cinccino with 1 double turbo energy will hit 330. So that's fine numbers against something like Charizard EX. But if we add a second double turbo energy, it actually screws up our math a lot. We would need 6 energy if we're counting 2 double turbo energy on there. So I like giving the space for more single energies and not having to deal with the damage reduction that DTE involves sometimes. And just keep a couple of them for like retreating. 1 on Lugia V-Star is good, 1 on Snorlax is good, maybe a backup just to retreat something off. And that's a pretty good spot, I find. The 4th one seems really unnecessary and sometimes kind of a hindrance over a singular special energy. So now we're going on to a new singular energy. This is Mist Energy. They just count as a single colorless. And this prevents effects of attack done to our Pokemon that this card is attached to. This is really good against Lost Zone type matchups. And Moon, potentially if Moon is a solo deck still, but you might even find the Moons in like the Lost Box type of decks. So it stops things like Sableye, Roaring Moon, Star Requiem from Giratina V-Star, making those matchups even more favorable for us. Lost Box can't really approach this matchup of doing Greninja plus Sableye double chops anymore, because if they ever Greninja both your Archeops, you can just stick a Mist on one or both of them, and then now they can't be Sableye, and it's kind of annoying for them to deal with. They'd have to Greninja again, which is a lot more resource intensive for them. And it also protects our big Pokemon like Lugia V-Star from just being one shot with Star Requiem or Frenzied Gouging from Roaring Moon. Combining Mist Energy with the energy I'm talking about in a second, V-Guard Energy, makes our Lugia V-Stars really hard to answer for something like a Giratina V-Star. So now let's move to V-Guard Energy. V-Guard Energy are really good against any V Pokemon decks, particularly Giratina V-Star, because the numbers line up really well. 280 damage, 280 HP on our Lugia. When we stick those on, it makes Lost Impact not a one-shot, and that's really good for our prize trade. And that can apply to Lost Zone Giratina or Arctina, which you'll probably see a lot of as well. And even Mirror, it kind of takes down the damage that it deals. A niche case is like a Lugia V-Star with a DTE. You'll usually find DTE on it, so it's only actually doing 200, kind of similar to how Trinity Nova tends to do 20 less almost all the time, at least on early Arc V-Stars. A V-Guarded Mew EX actually doesn't get one shot by Tempest Dive, so that's kind of like some nice little math there. But V-Guards are really good for smoothing out Giratina type matchups. Taking 280 from 280 down to 250 is really good for our prize trade. And then finally, we've got our last single energy, therapeutic energy. It's just a one of. This is good to stick on our Snorlax sometimes when we intend on attacking more than once with it potentially, just kind of leaving it up there to keep swinging. Particularly in something like the Lost Box matchup, like I mentioned, it's a Pokemon that's a little awkward for those decks to answer and could potentially actually be left alone, and they're trying to sort of attack some Pokemon on the bench, move around it. So in the meantime, we're just going to keep attacking with Snorlax. And to avoid the annoying sleep effect of this Snorlax, we just stick Therapeutic on there so we can just keep consistently thumping Snoring every turn. And it also acts as just another colorless energy. If we never use it for the sleeping effect or status conditions in general, it's always still just another special energy, which is always good. So that's the list. Lugia V-Star is looking to be back on top. Cinccino is really strong with all these energy being able to power it up. It can suffer some slight consistency issues I've found, but when the deck does set up consistently turn 2, I feel like it's probably one of the highest power level decks in the meta right now, and definitely worth playing. So let me know what you think of the list. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.